And howdy, everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. You're having us come to you straight from Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, and it's lovely out here. We hope it's lovely where you're at. The world is starting to reopen. The sun is shining. The grass is growing. The weeds are in full bloom in my yard. So, yeah, it's normal. It's like summer. So, anyway, hope you're all doing well. We have a lot of stuff to get through on the live stream, so I was actually surprised. I thought, oh man, I've been so busy working. I got nothing to talk about. I'll just give a quick update. We'll be done. And I start writing down the show notes. It's like, holy cow, there's a lot of stuff to go through. So we're going to get to it in just a second. I wanted to first do a quick check. Hopefully the audio levels are better than before. I did a quick test and some mic checks earlier in the week, and it seemed like it was going okay. If there's anything funky happening in the levels or anything, please let me know. But other than that, hopefully we resolved that particular issue, if nothing else. Other than that, fun things that we're doing up on here. Please hit the like and subscribe button while you're thinking about it at the top of the YouTube stream. If you guys are catching it live, it helps us get the word out, and it does a world of good for our morale. Anyway, let's just do a quick check the chat, see how everyone's doing. Oh, let me also get those graphics up, and I can hide that distracting scrolling window over here so I can get a little bit more oriented. Alright, so, hail to Andre over there, as well as Greg and Oro. Oro has a question. Let's see, the reports referred in the Sidekick updated to the cloud for access to the mobile. Are those reports supposed to be created automatically the Sidekick? Do I have to create them first? And where should I say them so Sidekick can find them, please? Okay, so what he's referring to are the actual, we'll get straight into the questions, I guess. So let me go over to that, like, get the computer up on this one here. And give me just a sec. All right. Going over the computer monitor, and let me see if I can be really cool, get the picture-in-picture thing rolling here. I used to have that set up. That was one thing that I didn't think was set right ahead of time, but let me try it. There it is. There's my key, picture in picture, and switch it on. So yeah, you got me in this the bottom here. Okay, so there's two different ways to create a online report in ComicBase. So what you would do in general is, if you just want to create just a random report of stuff, you would go to the report menu. You'd say, you know, make whatever the report is that you want, like say a collection report. Choose whatever your parameters you want there, and then you'd say either export if you want to save it to your local device or put on a USB stick or a PDF file or something like that, or save to web. And if you save it to web, then you can give it a name, and at that point then it's going to automatically get uploaded by that name, and it'll appear in your account on comicbase.com. Now, another good way to do reports, if you don't want to worry about any of this stuff at all, is to go ahead and use Sidekick. And let me go ahead and pull Sidekick up on my machine right now. I've got it over the other monitor. So a great way to go here instead is if you use Sidekick and you go ahead and configure him, click the little gear icon over here, and under Save to Cloud, you can have it automatically make certain reports for you. It'll use the default settings for them, so you get like a collection overview of all your entire collection, or issue checklist for your entire collection, etc., etc. But the nice thing about this is Sidekick will do it every single time you back up your database, and by default you're going to do that on a schedule. In my case, my backup happens every week, Thursday at about 9:34 p.m. It saves my database up to the cloud, so I've got a backup of it. But just as importantly, it then goes and makes all those reports that I had selected over here. It makes those automatically. And then those appear both in your mobile app, and if you go to reports.comicbase.com, or if you go on comicbase.com, just go into the reports section under My Account. You'll see the reports there. Now, quick note, we are a little backed up right now on the reporting processor. It should be done and fully live by the end of this podcast, but if you've been waiting for a little while for your reports to show up, there's a good reason for it. I'll be going into some of that later on, but that should be resolved, like I say, by the time we get done talking here. So those are some basic ways to save reports to the cloud. Alright, so let's see here. Hail Scott and Greg C. Micronauts Bush. Wow, a lot of people in the chat here. Anyway, and the audio, thank goodness. Okay, we got that worked out. Yeah, we the new deck I've got going on here. Let me see if I can even show it. let me see if I can pull it out. Yeah, now I'm risking death. So if I go to the overhead camera, which is number 4 here, this is, you can see most of my switcher over here. It's the thing it's got that's nicer than anything, and unfortunately this is something you can't see. It's behind the monitor. Is it actually has a headphone output jack, unlike the old one, and so I can actually run tests with my audio. But the other thing I had to do, which was just as important, is I had to go ahead and run some streaming audio tests, because what comes out of my headphones and up to YouTube Stream isn't necessarily what you guys get by the time it gets encoded by their servers. So I basically pushed the audio as far as I could get without distorting into the stream. So hopefully it's a better level, and it should be in stereo now. There was also a cable issue, so hopefully we got that worked out. All right, so let's see. Other things on the list. Okay, yeah, content. Let's talk about content. Holy cow. You guys have been just blitzing it, and our editors have just been up to their elbows trying to keep up with it, everything that's coming in. There were, this way, we in the staff call, I was telling one of our artists, is like, yeah, hey, you know how we normally make graphics and update the website every 25,000 new thingies that we add to the site? What do you say we skip it this time and just go until we've had the next 50K mark? Because we went from 900 to 925,000 issues in the database so quickly that I didn't have time amongst all of our other projects to even ask him to update the site and put graphics out there advertising that we now have over 925,000 of such a thing. You know, I realize at a certain point I'm just throwing out what sound like arbitrarily large numbers, but just to put any of this in any kind of perspective, you know, 25,000 comic books is it's 12, you know, 120 long boxes worth of comics. It's crazy how much stuff that is, and that's how much new stuff we added over the course of just like about, you know, 4 or 5 weeks. Anyway, and we did a similar amount with the pictures, where we blew past the 700,000 mark so quickly that we barely got the time to update the slicks, you know, the things that go in the DVD cases, and now we're, you know, starting to, you know, push our way towards 725,000. Honestly, I'm just at this point I'm just gonna say every 50,000 is probably when we even bother to update the site to say, yeah, we have more stuff. But it's an incredible amount of new material coming in. And we're starting to finally see books and magazines cut loose, which is what I suspected, but the flood is now here, so it's nice to see that, and it's coming up fast. So anyway, thank you for everyone who sent in corrections and submissions. Thank you for our hardworking editors for trying to keep on top of it all. And then, you know, it's just neat to see the whole thing develop. I mean, this thing has gone so much further than I ever thought it would ever get when I started the program. It's just really rewarding for me just to see how it's done. All right, let's see how else we're doing here. Okay, Jesse Comics says, hey, I have a column called box number. How do I get that box number to print out on the packing slip so I don't have to do it manually? Is there a way to make that column printable? No, it's an interesting suggestion. But at the moment, there isn't a way to do it. What happens is, when we did ComicBase, let me go back over to this guy right here, and let's see if it holds my picture. No, it doesn't. Okay. So when you go to, like, let's go over to a comic title like Spider-Man. Spider-Man. My goodness, I cannot believe how many things there are now. I'm getting lost in my own program. Amazing Spider-Man. Right, okay, so there's the comic book, right? Okay, so take it a moment to pull up the jillion issues of that. So one of the things we've been trying to do over the course of history is we've been actually trying to pare down exactly how daunting this list of fields that we track for every single issue is. I used to count how many discrete pieces of data were in the database, and it's in the tens of millions. But yeah, we're tracking all this kind of stuff. You know, the credits. Other fields. Custom fields. Top grades, diamond order codes. Any number of things. But one thing we figured out is, no matter how many things we track, there's going to be things that we didn't think of, or that your guys will have needs for. That, yeah, maybe it's a kind of an idiosyncratic thing that's very important to you, but it's not going to be of huge interest to a lot of the folks. So we came up with this idea a long time ago of just saying, look, what if we just gave you custom fields? What if we just said, look, here's 4 text fields, a couple of date fields, and 3 check fields, and that's for every item in the database. And there's also ones that apply to the title as a whole, of title checkboxes and so forth. And we're not going to say what they're for because we don't know. They're for whatever you want them to be for. And some people use them for things like, I got this autographed, or I want to take this to a show and get it signed, or this is the one I'm sending away to get graded, or these are the ones I bought at the at such and such a comic show. One thing that's kind of popular to put in is this is the box or the file cabinet or whatever else that I'm keeping it in. A lot of times, that'll be one of the things. Before we had a separate, dedicated grading notes field, there used to be grading notes used to be a popular thing to put in there, but now that's actually such an important part of modern comic grading that it did actually get its own field. Box number is something that we've never fully embraced as its own thing in the program. We've never made a dedicated field for it, but it's certainly very easy to make your own. Matter of fact, in this database I've got going on here, I have custom field 1 already set up as box. So if I go and I take any of the custom fields and I come down here, I go set up custom fields, pull it over there, and all I got to do is say custom field 1 for comic books is box. By the way, the custom fields can be different based on the type of collectible. So maybe you want to track different things for books than you do for magazines. So they can be different depending on that. But in this particular database for comic books, I've set custom field 1 up as box, probably because the question came up before. Now, I don't personally track box. I keep my boxes in alphabetical order, and they're in whatever box is the appropriate one for alphabetical order. But some people, I understand, do like keeping that sort of stuff in the in a box field. So it would be interesting. Like I say, one of the limits we've got is because we don't know what you mean to use them for. We don't really know what special stuff we should do with these fields when it comes to things like printing packing slips or stuff like that. I mean, it could be absolute junk. If we just included it randomly, we'd be spewing all this stuff all over your packing slip and we'd make you mad at us. But I don't know, maybe we should think on that. Maybe there's some way that we can indicate that certain fields, are the sorts of things that that prints on a packing slip, prints on an order label, prints on a whatever. Maybe that's an option that we can include along with the custom field setup. It's not technically too hard for us, but I'd like to think through the problem enough to come up with a more generalized way of solving it, not just for box number, but for anything else you might want to put on there. Yeah, it bears some thought, but do bring it up. And another good one is if you post that one in the forums, you can get not just my thoughts on it, but you can get everyone else's thoughts on how they'd like to see some of these things played out. And we'll probably get to a better solution if we get a lot of people pounding on this issue, because a lot of people have different ideas of how they use the custom fields and where they might like to see them. And if we could come up with a nice, elegant method to use those in different places, I'd be certainly interested in extending that. Okay, let's go back to the chat here. A nice flex speed? John, I don't understand you kids. You kids with your lingo. I thought anyway, I don't know what that means. Okay, let's see here. To add my box number to the invoice, I put it in the grading notes for that issue and pull my books from the invoice. Yeah, it could be done. Yeah, it'd be nice, Perry, if we could make it so that we don't have as much. Switch it so you can see the stuff on there. I'm interested in just about anything that gives us ways of dealing with this stuff without making it super manual. And it's interesting, I do not disturb on my phone, and apparently that doesn't apply to things like, I don't know, calling me, so I had to turn off my phone just now. Excuse me for that, guys. Alright, let's see what else we got going on. Alright, so we talked about content. We are pushing 720,000 pictures now. I think it's like 716,000 at the moment. and we have lots of stuff just flooding in right now. Next note on content is if you guys have downloaded any of the 5 or 6 updates we put out this week, you might have wondered, first of all, why the heck are they putting out 5 or 6 updates in this course of a single week? We'll get to that in a second. But you might have also noticed, if you're looking at the mismatched items report, that a lot of things have moved around. And specifically what you'll have seen is that a lot of pin-up books and art portfolios, things like the Neil Adams sketchbook, or the Jim Ballant Art of Magic, or whatever else. Those things moved from the comics category, where they really didn't fit, because even though these people are famous comic artists, they weren't drawing comics at that point. They're showing off sketches, they're showing artwork. They're not telling stories with word balloons and pictures, and that tell a coherent narrative, which is really kind of our definition of a comic book. And so those things needed to be moved over to books, and there's something like 1,200 of them that, in one case or another, we wound up moving in the last couple weeks. Now, one thing I would strongly suggest you guys all do, which will help you a lot to get things back on the same page if you have a lot of these books listed in their old categories from earlier iterations, is when you go and you pull down an update, and I'll go ahead and tell it to re-download the most recent one here, just so I can show you the form. By the way, this is a trick here. I've already downloaded the update on this one, but if you hold down the Shift key and you say check for updates, it'll ask you if you want to re-download the most recent update, if that ever is of useful to you. Anyway, what I would strongly suggest is when you're downloading updates, click these bottom 2 items right here. Remove obsolete series if they have no items in stock, and remove obsolete items if they're not listed as being in stock. What that does is, if let's say that there's an entry for Neil Adams sketchbook in the database, and you've got boy, I'm really going to have to set up the macros when my thing comes in to keep the picture-in-picture on me, because I do like having the continuity of having somebody's face actually on screen doing something, as opposed to just staring at a screen all day long. But there comes a time when I really do need to be waving at something on the screen, because that's where the area of interest is. Anyway, I'm working on that. Let's say there's an entry for Neil Adams sketchbook in comics, and we go and move it over to books. Now, this is a one-time deal. It's not going to be an every time kind of deal. It's really making up for the old limitations of ComicBase prior to 2020, before we had books and magazines as their own categories. But when that happens, if you didn't have the Neil Adams sketchbook, it's really good if it is allowed to automatically get, as it adds the book entry for Neil Adams sketchbook, it's allowed to get rid of the now obsolete comic book entry for Neil Adams sketchbook, so you don't see it listed twice. So I would definitely suggest that. When you get done downloading the update, though, it'll present you with a little summary of how your collection has changed over time, and there's a little link in there which lets you view the unmatched items. That's kind of like the to-do list for anyone who's feeling very kind of compulsive about making all their collection exactly right and exactly match with the listings in our master database. The advantage of that, of course, is that not only do you get new artwork and pricing on the whole thing, but it allows you to then sell those items on Atomic Avenue, because the only things you can sell on Atomic Avenue are things that we know of and that match their entries in our database, because we don't want one copy of, say, X-Men listed under 14 different names, because that would be eBay and that would be no fun. Anyway, when you look at the list of items that didn't match, it'll tell you, hey, here's things that you've got listed as comic books which we've never heard of, and you might notice then as you go looking that those things are listed now as books or as magazines or so forth. At which point, what you'll want to do is you'll want to go under the edit menu and say change media type, and go to those individual things and switch them over to whatever type they are right now. You may need to change issue numbers. For instance, when you go to like the books, let's look at Neil Adams sketchbook on that. Sketchbook. The Neil Adams sketchbook, boy, I'm choosing terrible examples. Let's go, all right, I'm going to the Batman Vault. I know what I'm talking about on that one. I'm going to go with that one. So the Batman Vault used to be called listed as 1/HC as a comic book. Now, as a book, it's just the hardcover binding. It never had a number, and so you might notice that if your copy was listed as 1/HC, it automatically becomes HC1 is if it was part of a series. But you might want to go in there, edit it, and make sure you've unchecked that it's not part of a numbered series. Another way to go on that, if you know which one you've got and it's just a bunch of listing it one way, listing it the other way, and I find myself doing this a lot, is I'll go to the old comic issue that I had, like HC1 of Batman Vault. If I had Quantity 1 in it, I'll change it to Quantity 0, I'll bounce over to Batman Vault as a book, I'll put Quantity 1 into the new listing, and then I just download the update again and let it pull the obsolete things out of my inventory, and then all the bogus entries just go away because then they have Quantity 0. So that's how I go, but whichever suits you. But it is worth doing kind of the groundwork these next couple weeks if you could. Chip away at that list of things that don't match. It's a one-time deal. Like I say, we don't plan on switching categories and stuff really ever again. But to deal with the ones that were already in ComicBase, we did need to move them at some point, and we moved a ton of them this last time out. But it's good to get your stuff listed in the right place because it's going to come in very handy. John says flex, do brag, or show off. Awesome. Not sure what it was bragging about. It was probably something awesome though, so I'm going to go with that. Let's see here. Greg says, and let me switch back to showing comments. Where should actual portfolios, groups of plates not bound as books go? Things like Ralph McQuarrie's TV books and background and Sal Cortuccio published portfolios, etc. We don't really have a category for just art. If I wanted to list stuff like that in ComicBase, yeah, that's probably where I'd abuse it into. You can go ahead and submit it as a correction to our master database. I'm not saying we're necessarily going to take it, though, because technically it's art. But if it's anything that looks, I don't know, if you could have sold it on a bookshelf in a bookstore, even on a nice bookshelf, we'll probably be flexible and accept it that way. But if it's just like page 37 of, the Unknown Soldier portfolio or something like that, that's not within the scope of the program at the moment. So, but yeah, go ahead and put the stuff in as best you can. Okay, and Scott says, yeah, he's already ahead of me. He's already been correcting a bunch of the stuff. All right, so anyway, that is the big heads up on that stuff. Let's talk about the rest. Okay, yeah, so as I made a note to myself, the reporter has been slow. It's going to be better. Hopefully we're caught up by even right now. If you've been waiting on a report, if you're still waiting on something to appear on the back end that you submitted, send us a note. What we're trying to do is we're trying to, as we make big changes on our back end type stuff, we're also trying to toughen up all the little connective bits of tissue in the ecosystem of ComicBase. One of them is our poor, hardworking boy reporter, Jimmy. Jimmy is the program that takes your database requests and your report requests, turns them into HTML with all the pictures embedded in the right places and formats them so you can easily view them on different mobile devices. One thing that he's been dealing with is that oftentimes people upload databases that aren't in the best shape. If the database is just out and out damaged or can't be opened, it deals with that pretty, okay at this point. But there's a number of things where people will have dates and, they'll put dates in the date field of just like, instead of like, 1/1/2020 or something like that, they'll just put, 1/1 or something. It's like, and date 1 is too early to be a valid date in the world of comic book databases. We track no content that goes back to a year after the death of Jesus. But anyway, yeah, and I think the minimum date that we'll handle in the program is something like 1700. If you've got stuff that goes before that, let us know, because there actually conceivably are books that we might want to track that go below that. But the people who invented databases for computers, they all had different arbitrary places that they could say the earliest date or time that they wanted to track was. And for some reason, the very popular one for SQL Server was 1753. They thought that for some reason, that's the year, that there's no need to track things before that. And if you do need to do that, you need to do some extraordinary things to make that happen. At the moment, that's the lower limit on actual dates in the program. But what's really happening is people are mistyping things. We're trying to parse through them, and as we load load from your database into our more rigorous database on our end, there have been any number of things that have caused it to go, whoops, hold up there. And what we've been doing over the last week or so is we've been waiting for those things to occur as we sift through thousands and thousands of customer databases and see what kind of weird foo you guys have all stuck in your databases. And anytime it would have caused an error, we say like, okay, what's the appropriate course of action if someone ever does this particular weird thing with their database? And in some cases, it's just like, forget about it. We can go nowhere with this. Give it up. At which point, we're probably going to try sending an email to the record on file saying, hi, database number blah, blah, blah has some problems with it, and you need to, try to fix those before you send it in again. Other things like the dates, we can scan through in pretty short order. We can scan through every date in your program, and if 6 of them have foo in them, we can ignore those 6 dates. And that's one of the big things that we changed over the last week, is we've been waiting for it to hit these breakpoints on the back end so we can see where the trouble is, see what a fix could be, and then we restart the whole queue and over again. And we finally got to the point where it can process whatever weird stuff y'all have sent in over the course of about a week and get to nothing that actually breaks it or stops it from executing. The one exception I've seen today is if you have old school ComicBase 2017 databases that are just not in great shape. Sometimes it's really hard to open those up and get them to perform queries on them. They're not exactly damaged. I mean, they do eventually open and finish, but it could take like an hour sometimes if the database is just, in rough shape. And I think, honestly, what's going to happen is at a certain point, I don't know if it's this month or this year, but at some point we're going to say, yeah, ComicBase 2017 databases no longer are going to be eligible to do automatic reporting on the back end. You're going to have to upgrade to something more recent. We haven't had to do it yet, but if we have you guys send us too many more bogus 2017 databases, it's going to force the issue. So if you do have bad ComicBase 2017 databases, consider taking them out of the list of databases that you send to us via Sidekick, because then it's way less trouble for our back-end program, and we appreciate it. All right, let's see here. Audrey says, still a problem I told you about with the update in 4 databases. Sidekick, the ID is non-double, report the database, all the same database name. I'm not sure. I'd have to refresh my memory on the exact type of issue. The one thing maybe if this clarifies it for you or anyone else, when you send a database up to ComicBase to our servers, we open it up and there's a field in there called your ComicBase database ID. Let me show it to you over here. And come up here on the picture, come up on there. So if you come up here and go to collection statistics, all right, click on this icon. This is actually the official IBM, icon for a database. A database. For the people who, if you ever wondered what this thing is supposed to represent, it actually represents drum storage. If you guys have ever done really old school computer stuff, they used to have platters, and just imagine like a disk drive blown up to ridiculous size. I want to say these things were about 18 inches across, but you would load in a drum full of disks, and there would be read heads that would come out from the sides of the drum unit and read the thing. Anyway, someone who decided back in the early days and this was fast storage back then, as opposed to tape storage, someone decided that a bunch of drums assembled together was the perfect icon for database. And so amongst everyone who does database work for a living, this sort of thing became the official way you represent database. Go figure. Anyway, but if you click on database info, it will tell you all the nitty-gritty stuff about your particular database. So here's what size on disk, here's exactly where it's sitting on my disk and so forth. It's in US dollars, the last time exchange rates are updated, but here's the money right here. The database ID number. What that is it tells all of our back-end processes that this particular database is unique in the universe, and we will recognize it by this ID number no matter what name it comes to us as. Because of course I could take Pete's inventory database, I could save it as, ComicBase database, I could save it as my new ComicBase database, I could do any number of things with it, but as long as it's still called CE98F blah 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 blah, then anytime it gets seen, then it will update all the reports. It keeps everything in sync for that. So anyway, you can have 5 different databases on your computer, and as long as they have different ID numbers associated with them, they could all be called Bob's database. Now, this will be confusing for you because when you go and view them on the mobile app, if they're all called Bob's database and they have different ID numbers, you'll wonder which one is which, because you don't typically see the long ID number which the server regards as its true name. It has a table which kind of maps those two things together, but the one that's considered authoritative, the one that it's like your driver's license number, is this long thing over here. So if you ever run into that situation, you might want to consider just removing the databases you don't recognize from your profile on ComicBase.com and reposting them again, because as soon as you post or check stats or do anything with a particular database, our servers will then immediately know, oh hey, database number CE98 blah 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 just checked in. It was, last we heard, it was called Pete's inventory database. So all right, go ahead and update and make a new record for Pete's inventory database, and we'll use that as the friendly name for this long number every time you see it, and then it preserves all the old reports and things like that as you go. But anyway, if there's more to the problem, reach out to me and we'll handle it. All right. Some other suggestions on copying and pasting. Gregor points out another good reason to go through the Unmatched so you can discover areas creepy and eerie got moved from comics to mags. Absolutely good point on that. Now let's see here. I guess I have to turn off. I have to switch to that, and then it allows. Okay, I'm starting to understand how the picture-in-picture works on this thing. Okay, so and yes, Steve, you're like psychic, man. It's like when picture-in-picture is showing the post doesn't work, not displayed. Yeah, because what's happening here is the way it's actually showing the post is, and let's see if I can get an overhead view. I don't know how visible this is going to be, but so here's the overhead view of my setup, and if I move my camera up to this one, you'll see that this spot right here is nothing but a chroma key. It's monitor number 3 of my setup, and what's happening is that's being used as a compositing key for all the post graphics. So when I click on a post on my console, it actually puts the post over here against the chroma, and it bleeds that image through onto whatever my main monitor is, which only works if I'm not already doing the similar trick to show the picture-in-picture. So when you're doing picture-in-picture, basically what happens, so here's full picture me, all right? When I do picture-in-picture, what I do is if I go to another thing right over there, it's using a similar kind of keying technology to show part of me down here in the corner, but then that uses up the same part of the switcher's memory that it would have been used to do the keying on the whole thing. So I always have to remember to go back to some kind of full view without a picture-in-picture in order to show the keying on the thing, because, well, anyway, we figured it out. Now, at some point, I've actually got a bigger, better version of my macro deck on order. It should show up maybe next week, and it'll probably take me about a week to program it properly. But instead, what'll happen then is instead of pushing buttons on my switcher to switch different views, I'll push buttons on the macro deck, where what it'll do is it will do all, if doing a particular move, like I need to come out of picture-in-picture, I need to switch on the keyer, I need to switch over to camera 1, it can do all that stuff in one motion, and so Genius Boy over here doesn't forget the 3 different steps and talks to myself with view of anything for 5 minutes before someone points out in the chat. It's like, dude, I can't see anything you're talking about because I thought I'd switched it and I hadn't quite. It makes things slightly less awful. All right, moving on. Let's see here. Scott McCloud argues in Understanding Comics, the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics are in comics. Pete apparently wants to keep those in the database. Ha! I have no response for that. Steve says, he's referring to the drum storage. I used to use that type of storage. I don't even doubt it. My first job when I was at Apple Computer, the way I weaseled my way in the door is at the Fremont manufacturing plant. I got a job as a systems analyst working to support something called the Tote Stacker computer, which was a PDP-7 computer controlling a huge mechanical arm that ran up and down. Imagine like if you had those library bookshelves, that you've got the chairs that roll up and down on in between the aisles. Imagine that instead of the ladder running up and down the aisles in your stacks in the library, imagine that it was a crane that was running down a rail, and it could go up to about 30 miles an hour. And what it would do when it got to where it wanted to go is it would lift up a mechanical arm, ram it out, and grab a bag of part, a bin full of parts, resistors or RAM or whatever it was, load it onto itself, go down into its travel position, roll down, in alarming speeds down this aisle again, get to an output bin, dump it out there, and then that would then roll down to whatever appropriate assembly line was running short of whatever the thing was. I was in charge of the computer that not only ran the mechanical arm, but also kept all the bin tallies, working for the manufacturing floor. So one of the things that was really weird about it is periodically, it's a physical thing, and periodically something would go wrong. The tote wouldn't quite get put back where it was meant to be. It would just get stuck on the lip of its storage bin or whatever else. And as this thing's ramming down the aisle at 30 miles an hour, it would actually careen into the side of this tote, shattering it and sending thousands of resistors everywhere, and then causing my beeper to go off like crazy. And then everyone had to do immense amounts of reconciliation and all sorts of computer food to make that happen. And then, of course, because the thing was built on a PDP-11, that's a DEC PDP-11 for the main box that interfaced with the whole manufacturing line, you need someone with really, really excellent, at that point, current, out-of-date computer knowledge from university to come in and write Fortran to do the work to reconcile, all sorts of weird conditions on the whole things. But periodically, if the system really got hosed, you had to reboot the thing from scratch, which in this point involved going and reaching into going to the data center, reaching into a ginormous bin, pulling out the drum that included the boot deck for this thing, loading it and spinning it up, and then that caused the whole machine to boot up. Really, really, really old school foo. But anyway, that was my first job at Apple. Anyway, okay, am I feeling Atomic Avenue questions today? Hell yes, let's get on to it. Thank you, Hoarders Hide, for getting onto the mix of things. But that was actually on the next item on my agenda. Alright, now one problem I'm getting right now is I've noticed that the monitor off of my computer feed is going crazy. So let me see if I reboot that monitor, if it gets any better, because I'm watching in the multi-view right now as it's just dancing around. I may need to pull it and see if it restabilizes. If so, that's going to be really not charming at all. But let's see what we get. So if I switch over to that, oh look, it just stabilized, thank God. Okay, so let's go over to Atomic Avenue. You guys might have noticed if you've been on the system today that we've been a little busy, and Atomic Avenue looks really different than it used to. It took us freaking forever, and for my part, that I do apologize, but I am very happy to announce that as of today, or technically as of late last night, you now can fully buy and sell books, magazines, and comics on Atomic Avenue. And it involved a redesign of the whole system. You'll see that it's got a lot more stuff going on. There's our live stream down there, but it's got separate areas now for the comics, the books and the magazines like there. Now, at the moment, it's a little ludicrous because, for instance, comics, if you look at our little scorecard up here, we have 1.6 million comics for sale. If we go over to magazines, on the other hand, we have 711 magazines in the entire system as of this moment. I expect this to change rapidly because now you can finally sell things. Up until then, honestly, probably of those 711 of them, 600 of them are probably mine because I was the testing guy, so my stuff's actually up for sale. And as a result of it being my testing stuff, you see a whole bunch of Doctor Who stuff and a whole bunch of leftover Playboys from when we were first indexing Playboy. I went to a garage sale across the street from us where I thought, well, you know, people have been asking us, are we ever going to include Playboys in the database? And it's like, there's some guy across the street who has two, you know, the storage totes full of Playboys. We're asking $10 for both totes. And it's like, do I get the totes with those? Because I'm thinking, can always use a storage tote. And you know, the person sells it, sure. So we wound up with a whole bunch of like rando, you know, Playboy type stuff from, you know, the 70s on up and various other foo, you know, thrown in there. But we used that as the basis when we first started, maybe a decade ago, to index all of Playboy, and then various other things fell in as well. Anyway, so all that stuff now actually has some actual visibility on the system now. You can now, you know, you can browse through, you can look through stuff, you can order it, and it does it does actually execute. You can actually, you know, complete orders and assign out on the system. Now, some things that are different about this. So, like I say, first of all, even though you can go and just from the main thing here, you can just, you know, search for whatever you want. You can go, you know, let's go say Batman Vault, right? And it's going to find anything with those words in it, regardless of its type. And if it's not, you know, the thing you were looking at just now, it'll take you over there, just like in ComicBase. Some of the searches at the moment only work for comic books. Some of them are maybe not that interesting if you're not talking about comic books, but I realize that you know, this is something that we'll be working on in the future. But if you want to do, say, a writer search, you can't find articles by Ray Bradbury right now. I don't know if that's a major driver of sales right now, but that's a limit of the current thing in the system. What we are actually thinking is we want to take another whack at how we do the searching, because I think the searching on Atomic Avenue is a little too fussy. It's I think, you know, everything's an artifact of when it was built, but the searching on Atomic Avenue tends to be, you're either gonna, you know, look it up by its name and then browse through a bunch of issues, which is, you know, okay, that's fine. Or you can go to an advanced search on it, and you can search by, you know, the UPC number, and it's between $5 and $6.53, and, you know, and it's published by Titan, and I mean, you can do all these amazingly convoluted compound searches on the whole thing, which are of interest to exactly 3 people. I think what's more interesting is if you sit there and say, hey, find me Doctor Who stuff. And then at that point, what a lot of people do is they'll fly out a filter on the left-hand side, or, you know, or at the top, which says, hey, you know, let me filter my results. So I'm looking at the big list, but now narrow it down and, like, maybe put a price range in there, maybe put a cover date range, maybe put, you know, things that relate to what it is you've already searched. And so basically do the broad search first, and then narrow is probably a better metaphor for this day and age than the way some of the more advanced searching in Atomic Avenue worked back in the time, you know, back in time. So I think before we, I made the argument at least that before we go whole hog and recreate slavishly all the really detailed searching that we've been doing when we first introduced Atomic Avenue 2.0 about a decade ago, with all those levels of search, maybe rethink the user experience so that we give something a little more organic, a little nicer. So you're looking at the stuff you maybe want to buy the whole time, and you just see less items as you go. That's something that we'll be looking at as we go. So anyway, let's see here. Mentioned the Mark message before you moved back that wasn't done already. The content's clearly comics, the construction is magazine. Yes, I follow that as well. Let me see here. I want to go back, and this is the lesson of. Let me go back to the main camera view and switch so I can get the whole thing. All right. Horace says, I noticed an issue quirk with the search in AA. If you search for items with grade CGC 85, return all edges of them CGC book of that grade. Yeah, it's a good, interesting question. I'll bring it up with the Atomic Avenue guys. When you're talking about I want a thing in a certain grade or better, CGC is weird, because when you say CGC is part of your grade, it literally is saying I want it to be slabbed by CGC. In other words, it's not 8.5 would be equivalent to an unslabbed very fine comic, give or take. But if you say I want a CGC 8.5, what you're really saying is I want it in a CGC slab for a regular CGC grade in 8.5. If you want something that's in near mint, you have to say kind of near mint. So what I believe, and I'm going by memory here because this is that kind of like really nudgy kind of stuff that I'm trying to half recall from when this work was largely done about 10 years ago, is I think we figured out that certain CGC grades in the real world wind up evaluating to a certain percentage of near mint in terms of pricing. So for instance, nominally a CGC 9.4 is the same book as a near mint book. In reality, it sells for almost 4 times what the unslabbed version will sell for. So if you say I want a CGC 9.4 or better, what you're really saying is I want something that sells for 4 times the near mint price or better. And so I believe that the intention at least was that you would find CGC 9.6s and PGX 9.8s and all those other things, because they're all considered better than, an unslabbed near mint. But this does get into the weeds pretty hard and heavy. So this is something to look up, later on. And honestly, I think if we take another whack at the whole thing, the whole thing would probably be much clearer if we said, show me graded or not graded. And if you say graded, let me narrow it by the grading service, and then let me narrow it by the grading range. I think that personally would be a lot more intuitive to me than trying to somehow finesse out the perfect rifle shot search, which gets me exactly the one item I'm looking for. It's probably better when you're shopping, my sense is, to start big and say these are all the things that might be, and as I narrow different parameters, this is how the list changes, and I can see how that changes. And then if I don't find a certain thing I'm looking for, I can go and add it to my wish list, and that I know goes according to whatever grade you state. All right. Let's see here. Lance. Oh, yeah, Bandline says, oh good, now Pete can get another copy of that Art of Jim Ballant book. Yeah, so the joke on that one is, let me see if it came up here. When we started out on the system here, let me switch back to picture-in-picture. When we started out on the picture here, as I said, there were only 240 books or so. Actually, I think there were 210 this morning, so we're already rocketing up the charts in terms of what was there. And so in order to test the transactions of just whether anything would work, I just took the first thing that was marked as a book alphabetically in my collection, which was The Art of Jim Ballant, Magic in Black and White, and I bought it from myself like 35 times, which, because I needed also to have something start as the hot right nows. This thing, right, for the next week or so, Art of Jim Ballant is going to be really, really hard to dislodge from its top spot on the sales charts. Because, there's like 35 recorded sales just this last week. Now, those drop out over time, and realistically what's going to happen is, because it's now possible to buy things on the system, you're going to see more legitimate things actually selling on the system, and then that will switch around. But in order just to power these carousels, I needed to have something to go on just to get it going, and so that's what's happening right now. Also, want to talk a little bit about some of the carousels on here. So what happens is about 4 times a day, figure out some of these searches. You guys might recall from the old system, if you did searches for like blowouts or on sale and things like that, some of the searches are actually pretty, they call it, computer guys call it, they're expensive to compute. In other words, you have to look through a lot of stuff, and then you have to say, all right, now which of these things are, so for instance, on sale it has to be 20% or less below their nominal guide price. And so it has to, search a lot of things and then narrow down the list. And we're doing that for comic books when there's 1.6 million things to look through. That's an expensive search. So what we are doing to start with is we, about 4 times a day, go and we have the same thing that builds our little scorecard over here. We'll compute what the newly arrived books are. It'll pick the top 500 newly arrived books, the top 500 on sale books, books below a certain point, magazines below a certain point, and so forth. It'll pre-compute a list of matches from that, and then for the next 4 hours, you'll get a random selection served up to you. So if I'm looking at Hot right now, and I go back to this, and let's go. Actually, sorry, Hot right now. Hot right now isn't one of those, because it's, like I say, that one's got a lock. But if I look at, say, newly arrived, there's a lot more items to choose from there. And if I go back to that one right now, you'll see under newly arrived, you get a whole different set offered to me in my carousel, and I can browse through as I go through there. If I want to see the whole list of newly arrived, you can just hit view all, and then it shows you the full original list that it would have had under the old graphic buttons, for what's all new on the system. But anyway, that's a new thing. You guys have maybe noticed we've gone pretty heavy toward the carousel look of things, honestly, because it just feels way more current, and honestly, I buy with my eyes. I tend to buy things I'm looking at and say, like, oh, that's interesting. Whereas if I sat there and I just read a description that said Comics Between the Panels hardcover by Dark Horse, I'd be like, whatever. But if you're looking at like Marvel Tales from Adventure House, I'd be like, whatever. But you actually look at the picture and it's like, hey, that looks cool, and then maybe you click on it, you get interested in it, and you take it from there. By the way, another thing that's kind of neat about the system these days is once you've looked at it, it tends to follow you around more. It's much better at remembering who you are and where you were doing. So now when I go back to the main system and everything, even if it's between sessions, I can pick up where I was left off and be looking at exactly the last several books that just I was browsing under whatever name. And then that also follows me through different categories. So anyway, that's some of the major differences in the system between where it was and what it's doing now. Okay, Andre says he'll try erasing his report and try it again. Let's go back to some of the questions here. Yeah, Carol's been after Pete to 5 years ago. Find a way to get rid of Playboy magazine. He's found a way to do it. Yeah, not so much. I mean, look, I'm a heterosexual male. I'm in favor of women, but honestly, the weird thing is Playboy is, that the original $10 worth of tub full of this old guy must have had like 30 years of Playboys. I mean, I think they're more interesting just as historical curios as anything. I mean, it's just, for me, it's just cool seeing you've got the Madonna, oh my god, that one where like Madonna actually posed nude. If you actually see the pictures, they're like one of the great letdowns of your young life. But the idea of just, it was the 80s and that was pop culture, that's just cool. Or you see, various people, like Fawn Hall, or just various people who were in the news or hot or whatever else at the time. It's just to me, it's like, it's kind of a little bit, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's a little bit glamorous, a little dolled up, way of looking through time at this stuff. And the ads to me are also just amazing, because if you look at like the Apple computer ads from like the Apple II originally, these things have like 3,000 words of copy in them. I mean, these days it's sort of like Apple, think different, and that's the entire ad. Whereas like originally they'd be like, and here is in excruciating detail why this is the one computer that's going to make it so you don't hate computers anymore, and you'll finally achieve that dream of yours more else. And they will lay it out in type, and it's just neat seeing the way that stuff was all done. The famous Maxell ad with like I think they even did one with Peter Murphy from Bauhaus. He was in one version of it. Where he's the guy where he's like, his butler, he's crashed out, he's got his skinny tie on. His butler hands hands him a glass of wine and puts in the Maxell tape with whatever bitchin' music is on there, and his hair gets blown back and the stuff starts moving across the room. Is it I'm sorry, it wasn't Maxell, it was Memorex. Was it Live or is it Memorex? But I mean, all that stuff is, I mean, these are all, I mean, the ads and the pop art of the whole thing, honestly, are probably more of my memory of the 80s and 90s than any of the girls were. So, but anyway, I just think this stuff's neat. And so I'm actually, there's a part of me that says like, you know what, it's kind of cool seeing this stuff again. So, and maybe someone will feel the same way and order some, what really are not very valuable magazines. These things go for like $2 for the most part. And they're heavy as hell because, man, did they put a lot of pages in back in the day. So yeah, that's another thing we had to worry about when we went to both books and magazines, is they have completely different shipping profiles than comics did. Whereas like, the standard comic book is, with a bag and board is going to be, plus or minus 0.2 ounces of 3.4 ounces. It's and then it varies a bit by page count, which corresponds with this whole formula. But we've got that one dialed in pretty heavy. The rough metrics on magazines are completely different, and books are different again. So anyway, Scott Connor was pointing out, it's like, I was talking about the searching. Being a comic book collector and a Bradbury collector, I could be one of those 3 people who's looking for the really detailed searches. Yeah, I don't doubt it, man. I think when we go back, we take another whack at searching. I want to go at it in a more modern way. Let's see here. Andre said, remember the search for comic with no cover you told me about is a painfully long. Can you put a report output in ComicBase for that? God, I'm gonna confess, I don't remember that conversation. Sorry, man. I really want to, but I just, if you could refresh my memory or send me an old email or something, it'd probably come back to me. I've been pulling way too many late nights, and I just don't recall that one. Let's see, with magazines with photo covers, would those be indexed for the subreddit pictured by entering their names in the cover artist field? Great question. I don't know. I think it's going to be one of those things that probably evolves. I think what we'll probably do in time is, because we have this issue a little bit with storylines and notes, where right now the fields in ComicBase are very, they're very defined. If I'm searching for, Batman, A Lonely Place of Dying, I'm literally looking for things which contain some part of the storyline called A Lonely Place for Dying. But if that storyline isn't separately indexed within a novel, which is the whole dang novel is called Batman, A Lonely Place for Dying, because I'm only searching the storyline field for that, right now the search isn't going to return that result at all. I think there are some places where on the title, the notes, and the storylines, where we ought to probably start including results from some alternate versions of the search, just as part of some of the organic results. And I think when you start talking about, like I want to find the Madonna cover of Playboy, where do I put that? I think it'd be, you're probably going to do best when you say, what would a naive person looking for it do? And if you literally just put in Madonna, is probably the most salient thing about that issue. It probably ought to offer Playboy magazine, specifically issue number whatever it was, as one of the search results. That'd probably be the best way to go. I don't think it does it right now, but I think that's probably, if I had my ultimate version of the next gen of the system, that's probably where I'd probably want to see it go. All right, let's see here. The grades vary in degree of refinement from comics to mags to books. Yeah, so when you're looking at books, so comics are probably the most nauseatingly graded thing on the planet. We have infinity different variations of, even just with ComicBase doing what the so-called full grades as opposed to like the VF minus and the VF/NMs. Even though we officially stick to only like the quote-unquote full grades on those, there's like a couple hundred grades you could have for a comic book, between all the different restored and graded services and stuff like that in comics. Magazines, there aren't nearly as many players on the graded side of things, but they tend to have a similar grading system to comics. Books, there is no standardized grading system whatsoever. Various people have tried different things. They have limited levels of adoption, but I'd have to say, like, who's selling the most books in America right now? That's got to be Amazon. And Amazon's list of grades is very, very, very simple. I think there's 4 or 5 grades. It's basically new, used like new, used very good, used acceptable, or poor. I think that's the whole list, and so that's what we use as a starting point for our grades. And honestly, unless we get shoved away from that, I don't know a good reason why we wouldn't want to stay with what clearly is working for Amazon. Now, if you got to a point where there were professional grading services for books that were getting any kind of significant level of heft, I think we'd have to add, if there were slabbed copies of different things, I think we'd have to add those in there. And if I look at antiquarian booksellers and I see like first prints of Alice in Wonderland and things like that, what's typical is that you'll see the thing in plastic. It won't be slabbed, but it'll be, they'll actually bag the thing up and they'll have written extensive notes about exactly how wonderful this edition is and how clear the author signature is on the tip-in page or whatever the thing is. But I'm not seeing any standardization of that, so I don't think we're going to have the level of fanaticism we see in grading yet, but we'll see. It's an evolving situation. I'm like most things, I think we're going to take our cue from where does the market go on these ones. I think we start by selling things, and then we see where people demand things be made more exacting or not. Let's see. This one's worth it. Scott Connor says, Bradbury had a quote about the content of Playboy along the lines of saying, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. That is awesome. Yeah, Playboy back in the day, and I can't believe I'm singing I'm getting oddly nostalgic for, for a magazine that honestly was never like the big hotness. But it was basically Hugh Hefner's whole conceit was he was going to take, sexy girls, and it was going to make it acceptable for men of the world to look at them, because you're going to put them in between ads for, the good life, for vacation homes and sports cars and high-end stereos and things like that, and you're going to have the best writers of the day. And man, the page rate that Playboy paid was it buried all the competition. So even if you were, Stephen King or Ray Bradbury or Arthur C. Miller, whoever it was, you would absolutely write an article for Playboy, because they paid $2 a word back when that really meant something. And they did great interviews with like important people, and yeah, I mean, so it was not exactly a downside for the people who wanted to show up on the interviews that they're going to be scantily clad women giggling and running all around the place in this lavish mansion. I mean, that definitely added to the sex appeal of the whole enterprise. But it made all the movers and shakers for generations want to be seen in Playboy. I mean, hell, ComicBase got noted on Playboy's website once upon a time, and we saw significant business from it. Just because someone said, "Hey, did you have comic books? Did you know those things are worth money?" And they just gave us a mention. I mean, that was like a million years ago at the dawn of the internet, but yeah, I mean, that was great for us. But yeah, Ray Bradbury wrote for them any number of times. I've seen Stephen King novelizations, go through them. There's some good stuff in there, and yeah, it's great looking women. So, and Rich says my chair squeaks. Sorry about that. I got what I got. All right, let's see here. Seems so selling an AA to know AA's great definition as possible to avoid confusion. I think right now there's very well defined grades for the things that are similar to the comic style grades, near mint, very fine, and so forth. Those apply to the comic thing. But is there, if someone says, hey, I bought this thing and it was listed as used very good, and you bought it and it's only used acceptable, from watching other folks do business in that realm, I think some level of grade stuff is you can't help but have a little bit of edge case argument. The usual way to solve those things is, when in doubt, undergrade slightly, or grade it as if you're the one doing the buying as opposed to the one doing the selling, because that tends to make you much more clear-eyed about what it is you're doing. That being said, no matter how precisely you define the grades, very, very hard to rules lawyer them to the nth degree. There will always be somebody who says, no, I see it as being just on the other side of the line. So honestly, as long as you can not have that argument 99% of the time, sometimes you just gotta pocket the win and call it a day. All right. The Confident Man says, too many late nights, do just what I do to keep going. Drink 10 to 15 cans of Diet Pepsi every day. Once I'm on a third, I'm good all day. Good God. And let's see here. Weekly. Oh, and Gray wants to remind us, weekly reminder, we have a dedicated thread on the CB message boards, so you can request topics. Absolutely, folks. Good to do. And a Confident Man asks, how about ComicBase starting a professional grading service for books? Interesting question. It did come up as a late night conversation once. It was basically like, hey guys, it would be interesting. Probably a terrible idea, but what if Atomic Avenue offered a service where you could more or less consign books through them and that they would guarantee the grade? The question then is, would people pay the extra VIG to make that useful? So, I mean, if it cost an extra 10% on the sale, but you had a guaranteed grade and easy returns, if it was then fulfilled through Atomic Avenue and professionally, and assured through Atomic Avenue that the grade will hold up, would that be something that people would spend money on? Lots of talk about this. Once we finally got the damn books and magazines into the whole system, then it just opens up the slew of hey, what's the next thing that everyone could do? And honestly, there are many cool next things that I'm very hot to have done, but that is definitely on the list of things that were talked about. Let's see here. The search for all books with no cover in ComicBase. Oh yeah, is null. Very long. Yeah. Can I add it in the report? Okay, thanks, Andre. Thank you. I do appreciate what you're referring to now. Let me think about that. It's yeah. I mean, it's yeah. Let me think about that. Is the really the answer? Okay. And Ronald Claremont says, when using change title media type, it transferred all the data except for the cover date. When you went from comics to mags, all the cover dates were wiped out. Yeah, so there are certain dates that are transferred and not transferred between different type of media. I do believe cover date is transferred between comics and magazines and vice versa, but I do know that if you go from comics to books, you will lose the cover date because books don't have a cover date and so forth. There's a couple little futzy things like that where there is some loss of data. The good news is if you do lose it, yeah, now it's an official listing, typically we'll bring it right back for you because you'll be part of the update. All right. Yes, new sales pitch for ComicBase. We're the comic database that got mentioned in Playboy. Yeah, we also we were in a couple frames of a Star Trek fan movie. We were in if you guys ever saw the movie Paul, there's a couple frames where you can see me in our Atomic Avenue balloon over our booth. You know, in the opening where they faked Comic-Con at the Albuquerque Convention Center. We've shown up in a couple different movies and things over the years. All right, and oh wow, okay, and Andre, thanks all everyone for the comments about the cover catalog and over 1,000 downloads. Bang! All right, way to go, Andre. All right, so really quickly, just to wrap up here, because I know we're running kind of at time, but let's just do the thing. What's next? So. Talked a little bit about Atomic Avenue and some of the talk of what we have planned. Very next thing, as in I was working on it this morning, and it didn't get done quite in time for showtime, is I do want to change up the way autocomplete works. I want it to work much more like it does in ComicBase, where you see a little bit of a preview of what it is you're looking at as you go. I think that makes it much easier to find what you're doing. I'm working with a guy who's much better at JavaScript than I am to make that happen. Hopefully we can make something rock with that pretty quickly. It may involve some database work to configure and cache some of the image stuff, because there's a responsiveness issue with that, where you need to be able to fire off weird rando queries and get back at that point a lot more information than just the name. I need to be able to show you like a tiny sized picture thing along with the result set, and I need to do that everything as fast as you can type. So that's something I definitely want to see. You will see books and magazine sets. They will automatically appear as people generate them. Right now there's a certain minimum that you need to hit of a given type of thing before it will build that carousel out for you. That's set by us on that one. For instance, like you don't see right now any blowout deals in books because I didn't post any of my books for half off. That's the definition of a blowout deal. But if you've got a bunch of books you just want to dump, post them to the system, mark them as half off, and then boom, suddenly there's a carousel under books and it's all your stuff. There's also another kind of set that is coming on the horizon that's going to be much cooler if we can sort out the technical issues on that. So that's a thing. Last item of business on that one. With ComicBase, there is a ComicBase 21.0.2 update coming soon. It's going to address basically everything we've been doing since the 2101 quarterly update is all going to get rolled into one big release. Of note, it will do a better job of downloading magazine and book covers. We realized there was an issue with that earlier in the last 24 hours where it was misfiling some of the book and magazine covers. It's resolved for now, but we need to actually do a patch to the software on our end to make it to fully download all those things. That's coming probably in the next week or two. When that happens, we'll also be refreshing all the picture sets for the archive and the Blu-ray disc images. So if you are of a mind to get a full download of just everything that is current for the software, at that point you'll be able to, give us a couple 3 weeks, but you'll see that there's a new download under my account registrations with all new picture discs. If you wanted to, you could download all and install all those and have the full set of everything that was current up to that point. It'll probably be at or just short of 725,000 pictures, which is crazy to me. That's like it's what is it, 13 times the number of pictures that were on the first archive edition. And the archive edition was our big blowout DVD. We can't believe we're holding everything on one disc, thing from, not too long ago. So yeah, just nuts how far that's gone. And anyway, that is basically my news on that front. Okay, so anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you all coming. And we're going to talk about something else next week. And at some point, I'm going to take some vacation. So anyway, guys, thanks again, and I will see you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.